Make your life better with a new job at UPS. Join Team Louisville as a warehouse worker, earn $14.50 plus up to $425 in weekly bonuses depending on shift. Search and apply now at upsjobs.com/Louisville. That's upsjobs.com/Louisville.
Exmark makes the mowers that care for the lawns that set the stage for the backyard life. As the commercial mowers more landscape pros trust, Exmark mowers get you on and off the lawn without compromising cut quality, comfort, or reliability. Exmark, official mowers of the backyard life, starting at $29.99. Learn about the available finance offers and check them out today at The Mower Shop, 7400 Preston Highway, Louisville, Kentucky, 502-969-6433.
CarMax is hiring experienced auto technicians for many of its 200-plus stores nationwide. If you're looking for a job where you can make a great living while working on the cars that you love, then CarMax is the place for you. Join CarMax to grow your technical expertise and work with state-of-the-art tools and technology. Work with the cars you love. Join CarMax. Apply today at CarMaxAutotech.com.
Nick said it was just okay. He said it was really reference heavy, and it was kind of an awkward story. He said it was just okay.
Okay, so just okay, which is what that's about the best I was going to hope for, because, first of all, sequels never do very well.
Especially comedy sequels.
Yes, that's a good point. And ones especially that are built on a very thin premise. I mean, the premise is a basketball game with cartoon characters. How many times can you go to that well?
Exactly.
So, all right, so now, but you, of course, that is the acrimonious one.
Yes, my favorite of all my nicknames.
It's a good one.
I love that nickname.
Of course, you are not pleased about this in any way, shape, or form, and I don't know why, but I'm absolutely sure you'll tell us. So what is your problem with this movie?
It's just, it doesn't look like, I like the 2D cartoon drawings. I think Michael Jordan was iconic in it. This just seems like kind of a cash grab sort of situation to me. I don't know.
It obviously did. It grabbed a lot of cash.
It grabbed a hell of a lot of cash, but it's just not. I just like the original Space Jam, and I think you did.
Oh, so that's what I was going to ask you next. You did like the original.
I like the original. I grew up with the original. You know, it came out the same year I was born, so I remember going back to the video store when they had those, you know, in Philadelphia when I was a kid, and I just kept renting it over and over again. I love that movie. It's a great movie. It's a great movie for, like, you know.
It's a great fun movie.
Yeah, exactly. It's a fun movie.
Take its place
it's not The Godfather or Citizen Kane out here, but it's a good movie to watch. And I feel like if you're a kid and you're watching it, you can enjoy it. I think part of it's the fact that, you know, I don't like LeBron. I see it as a cash grab, and I'm also not a child. I'm 25 years old, so I'm not going to enjoy it. But I feel like a kid would probably enjoy all the colors and the bouncing around and stuff like that, yes?
Well, again, I haven't seen it, but I assume. And also,
Right.
Kids, I think it's important to point out this. This is actually a legitimate point. Most of the people who object to it object to the fact it's not animation. It's CGI, right? Isn't that what it is?
Yeah, I don't care for that. I don't like
Well, that's
I
the
don't
point.
Like
Well,
CGI.
you grew up you're old enough to have grown up with still good old-fashioned cartoons. They're expensive to make. CGI is much cheaper.
Right.
So they do CGI, but the kids that you're talking about that it's appealing to, they don't know. That's all they've had, basically. Even the quote-unquote cartoon shows are all CGI now. So they wouldn't think a big deal about it. But yeah, I mean the drawings, the cartoon stuff was part of the creativity of the whole Warner Brothers stuff. If you go back and watch, you know, the old Bugs Bunny cartoons or Roadrunner, I mean, hell, Roadrunner didn't even have any dialogue. It was all just the drawings that made it funny.
And then a cloud of dust.
Meep, absolutely. So I don't know, not a thumbs up, not a lukewarm
kind
thumbs
of a side thumbs. If we're going to be like, you know, the Roman emperor sticking his thumb, it just stays kind of at the side. So the lion will only eat half of the guy.
That's even worse. Oh, all right. Well, I don't even remember if I saw the original. I think I did. I certainly won't go to the theater to see it.
Well, considering what year was Nick born? Like 1989?
Yeah, it's very good.
Okay, so he would have been about 7 years old. I got to think he would have seen it, and you would have come across it.
I'm sure he saw it somewhere. He went, a better set of parents took him to see it. I don't remember going to see it, to be honest with you. But all right, we'll have to. We'll see when it comes on TV. I'll have to see it. The thing that he did do, which is very cool, though, is they went to a drive-in. Although he told me it was like, as Yosemite Sam would say, "Oh, it's powerful hot." I guess it was very warm. It was uncomfortably hot. That's no good.
Yeah, no, drive-in's a great idea in theory, but then
you don't like that either now?
No, hang on, Bob. A drive-in is a good idea in theory, but then you take into account things like the weather, and it gets a little bit, it's a little bit different. I mean, I like the idea of a drive-in, and I think drive-in movies are super cool. I wish that was around when I was a kid. They weren't. They were very much past its prime. I would have loved to have gone to drive-ins, but there are factors to it that when you don't think about it until you're there and you go, oh yeah, AC would have been nice.
Yeah, that's the thing. You can't run your motor during the film, obviously, so you're going to sweat your brains out. Plus, I did like it. Here's the time when old school, the old movies, when you went to the old drive-ins, they used to have this box that looked like it was like the size of a cereal box. It wasn't quite that big, but you used to have to clip it to your window. That was the speaker.
Right.
I mean, you had to put this thing in your car. Now they do it over the radio, don't they? I think you got to tune to a station or something. That's too high tech. You need the clunky big box in there.
Oh, I tend to agree.
Yeah, so anyway.
Did you go to the drive-ins back in the day?
I went to a couple, not very many. This is one of my sad, a lot of happy memories. We went, the last time I went was in college, and there were 4 guys, we all went, and I did not know that they basically were just using it as an excuse to go smoke weed. So we went to this theater, and it was a double freaking feature that started at say 11 o'clock at night or whatever. It was one of the midnight showings, and the second film was like 3 hours long, and they were all out. I mean, they were all fried by halfway through the first film. So I had to sit there it's only good to see a crappy movie if you got other guys to make fun of it with you. You sit there so I'm there sitting in silence with these 3 fried guys and watching this awful movie that just went on and on and on and on, and then at 3 o'clock in the morning I kind of had to shake them all and say I'll drive home, and then we left. But that was the last time I went. I should go back just so I can sorbet, get that taste out of my mouth, because that was a very unpleasant
I tend to agree. I mean, if your friends will go get baked and then watch Once Upon a Time in America, which is a 4-hour film, you're not going to have a good time.
Especially because it was, and the thing is, I think if I'm not mistaken, it was supposed to be, it was an R-rated, semi-erotic kind of thriller, and
that sounds
the bad
ridiculous.
thing about R-rated that are shooting for artsy porn is if it doesn't work, it's even more laughable. And so there's all these scenes that I'm just. There's an episode in Friends where Chandler makes a bet that he cannot be sarcastic, I guess, for a weekend or something, and he can't take it anymore. At the end of the weekend, he stores up all these sarcastic lines, and he just shoots them one after another at all his friends, because that's how it was with me. I wanted to go knock on one of the windows of the other cars because there was such good lines that were just, because it was such awful filmmaking, and there was nobody to share the comedy with. So
I hate that. It's like taking the bullets out of your gun. You're just sitting there, I have all this great material and nobody to share it with.
Exactly.
Oh, I get that.
What's the sense of growing up in a hotbed of sarcasm like Long Island if you can't put it to use watching a bad R-rated erotic thriller? I mean, so that was a bad.
What do you give that movie? A thumb sideways, a thumbs down, or a thumbs up?
I would a running start and jump up in the air, thumbs down. I would just. Yeah, that was terrible. Just awful film. So anyway, but I do want to go. I guess thank God we still like to kind of live in the past, but this is not really in the past. This is retro cool that we have more than one drive-in theater in this area. So there's a 2-screen one in Georgetown. I think that's the one he went to in Indiana, and I know Louisville's got at least one in this area. So I think this summer that may be on my very, very modest bucket list to go see a good film at a drive-in. So we'll have to see. I wonder if they still have. When I was a kid, it was really weird. They would have slides at these things, which I thought was weird, because I thought the idea was you drive your car in and stay in your car, but you have to get out of the car to go to the snack bar, and they would have these giant slides, I guess as you were waiting for it to get dark or something, and the kids would all go slide down these big slides like they used to have at the amusement park. I'm not
seems
sure
like
how
it defeat the purpose.
How that became a thing at drive-ins, but trust me, it did. I mean, the drive-ins all had these gigantic slides. So, Anyway, well, thank you for manning the board at the beginning. We're gonna go to who I like to call. I think it's a great nickname. I'm going to keep calling him that, the decaffeinated commissioner, Greg Sankey, because it's a Sanka joke. That's the commissioner of the SEC.
That's a good joke. I appreciate that joke.
Yeah, he's the decaffeinated commissioner. So we'll hear from him at 12:30. So we'll check in there, and the acrimonious one will be leaving. He's doing this out of the goodness of his heart. He's going to help now we are. Yeah, listen, I like to put our business out there for everybody. We are like everybody else in the world right now, so incredibly short-staffed. If I'm not mistaken, I think this is right. We got some guy that we just grabbed off the street who's going to run the board, right? And I mean, he was just outside trying to get an ice cream next door. Is that right? Or
yeah. It's just like some kid. I said, "Hey, you want to make $5?" And he opened his mouth, and I said, "No, stop it! I need you to run a soundboard."
Oh my God! Wow, that took us to the gutter in a hurry there. But so what is the young lad's name? Who do we have there?
His name is Charles. He goes to West Virginia.
Oh, my goodness. On purpose? Hey, how you doing?
Yeah, I know, right? And, look, it's the worst state I've ever spent one night in, I'll tell you that right now.
There you go.
Easily. And I've spent plenty of nights in New Jersey, so I can honestly tell you that.
The old joke is I spent a week there one day. That's what they used to say. So actually, I like West Virginia. Nick hates me for saying that, but I do. So, all right, Sir Charles will be on the board in just a little bit. We'll let the acrimonious one go so he can spread his joy elsewhere.
But I'll be back in the 1 o'clock to ruin your day a little more, Bob, so we're
beautiful.
Good.
Well, I look forward to that. All right. Well, we hear from it's media day in the SEC. It's a little different. It's not. I mean, it's not going to be the usual, fire drill kind of stuff where the fans show up and stay in the lobby, pack the lobby, and as everybody who's anybody in any of the teams comes in, they fall all over themselves and try and get selfies and pictures and hugs and rub Nick Saban's elbow so they can tell their grandkids and stuff like that. But they're not going to have that. They're hurting all the people who are so determined to be there to an area outside. It's like you guys can stay out here and get sunstroke if you want, but you're not coming inside where all the players are. So that's what they're going to do for that. But unlike it won't be virtual. I mean, the people will be there, and so we'll see how it plays out. A lot of storylines there. There's 4 new head coaches. Most of the guys who are coming to the podium are not the quote-unquote skill players. No disrespect to the interior linemen, but it's going to be a real turnover in star power in the SEC this year. So it's going to be interesting to see who shows up and who says what. But the commissioner will be the first up at 12:30, and we'll listen to him a little bit later here on the V Show. I know it's going to piss people off, especially around here. But the fact of the matter is, based on what we're seeing, we're headed for another onslaught of COVID. Sorry, I don't want to be that guy. Here we go again. Because I mean, I'm sure there are some people listening who are convinced that it was a hoax in the first place, so they don't want to hear that. But I don't believe that. I also, again, this is when I get the hate mail because we are generally, Louisville's not, but the state in general is a very right-leaning state, and they don't want to hear that part of it. They think I'm making a political statement, but I really am not. That's the whole point. Like for example, the mask debate. I don't agree with it. I mean, the people who are like, well, I don't think we should be forced to wear a mask. I don't agree with their take on it, but I understand it at least. There is a shred of logic behind it. Although I don't agree with that logic, but I understand it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's like, we're being forced. It should be left up to us. I made the analogy. They don't leave it up to us to do less than 100 miles an hour on the highway. I mean, there are things that we do that are done for the collective good of all of us, and wearing masks is one of those things in my mind. But these people don't feel that way, and so I don't agree with it, like I said, but I understand it. But the not getting vaccinated, that becoming a political thing, I tried every which way. I've looked at it from every possible angle. I have no idea how that makes any sense to anybody. I really have no earthly idea. Because God bless the governor of one of the Republican states, Arkansas, I guess it is. I think it's Arkansas, who have, if they don't have the worst, they're in the bottom 5 of the least percentage of population being vaccinated. And he said the simple thing that I absolutely hammered it home for me. He said, look, he's a Republican. I'm not here to tell you from a political standpoint. If you trust the federal government, and that's what I'm saying. I get that. Well, I don't trust what the government's telling us. I don't trust Fauci. Okay, ask your doctor. There isn't a doctor who's certified in the country right now who would tell you not to get a vaccine. Man, now I'll get a phone call. Well, my doctor, Vinny Bombat, says, okay, but by and large, the medical community is unanimous that the only way to keep this thing from going hog-ass wild again is to be vaccinated. This is a much more contagious disease, and that part I don't understand. I just don't understand. I mean, I'm sorry it turned into a political football because it shouldn't. I mean, the polio vaccine, when my mother had polio, they were falling all over themselves to get vaccinated. I mean, nobody looked at it like, am I a Republican or a Democrat? Should I get it? It was like, give me a shot so I don't get this damn disease. But that's where we are, and and a lot of the states that love football the most, loves college football the most especially, are those that are most reluctant to go get vaccinated. And when you look at it that way, it's a recipe for disaster. But again, you could say, oh, bull crap, it's not going to happen that way. Okay, we'll see. All I know is the Coco Gauff, who's the outstanding 17-year-old tennis player, is not going to be able to go to the Olympics because she's got it. There are already 2 or 3 people in the village that have it. There's a bunch of people that had to withdraw from the Open Championship, the British Open, and this is just at the tip of the iceberg. I mean, you're looking at numbers, and they're going back to where they were before we started shutting some of this down. And I guess if your opinion is, well, we shouldn't have shut it down in the first place, okay, I don't agree with that either, but I understand it at least. But this is we're just, again, the thing that they warned about, and I know because in some areas it didn't happen. There were a lot of people that live in areas where the hospitals didn't get filled up, and so they were like, see, it was just a hoax. But I mean, trust me. I mean, I got relatives in New York. It wasn't a hoax in New York. It wasn't a hoax in New Jersey. You can say they handled it badly, fine. I don't care. But I'm just saying, it definitely was not a hoax. It definitely has the potential to be something very serious. And I'm really concerned about it because I don't want to go through this crap again. I really don't. But we are, by the way, if you're scoring at home, I looked this up last night. The states vaccinated by percentage. And they listed the whole country, the entire nation. Let me see if I can find where we were here. Here we go. Ranked by percentage of population. If you live in, as my producer at ESPN used to, if you live in Vermont, you can chant, "We're number one," because they are number one on the list. 67% of the people have been vaccinated. Massachusetts is second at 63. Maine is third at just under 63. Connecticut's fourth at 62. Rhode Island is at 60. Maryland checking in at 58. They're sixth. New Hampshire is seventh at 57.5. New Jersey is eighth at 57. The state of Washington is ninth at 56. New Mexico, 56, comes in the top 10. New York is just outside the top 10 at 11, 56%. Oregon is 12. D.C. is 13. Virginia is 14. Colorado is 15, Minnesota is 16, Hawaii is 17, Delaware is 18, California is 19, Pennsylvania is 20, Wisconsin is 21, and those are all the states that over half the population have been vaccinated at 21. Then you go down to the lower 30 because they list the District of Columbia also, so there's 51 listed here. Iowa's 22, Nebraska's 23, Michigan is 24, Florida is 25, Illinois is 26, South Dakota is 27, Ohio is 28, Alaska is 29, and there's Kentucky at 30. 44%, just under 45% of the population has been vaccinated, ahead of Arizona, Montana, Utah, Indiana coming in at 34, Nevada at 35, Kansas at 36, North Carolina 37, Texas 38, Missouri 39, and then the South Carolina 40, and then the bottom 10, North Dakota, Oklahoma, West Virginia, West Virginia, you should be wearing a mask, 38%. Tennessee is at 40, Georgia's at 45, Idaho's at 46, Louisiana's at 47, Wyoming's at 48, and then the SEC locking in with the bottom three. Arkansas 49, Mississippi 50, and Alabama proudly taking its place at the very bottom at 51. So we'll see. I mean, we will see. Believe me, I'm not, people, I love this when you bring this up. You're rooting for it. No, I'm not quite that twisted an individual. I got my own problems. I'm fighting cancer right now. I don't want to see anybody out there fighting COVID. I have no desire to see that. But I don't want to go through crap again where we're canceling games and stuff. And, the Yankees had to cancel a game against the Red Sox. You're seeing people who aren't going to be able to go to the Olympics. And maybe that's just going to be the reality. That could very well be the reality. And I guess if you want to know the truth, it's better than what we did last time in terms of from a fan experience. If you're looking at if a building holds 20,000 and they allow 12,000 in, you'd say it's a shame. We'd like to fill it, but 12,000 still creates an atmosphere. I don't think anybody wants to go back to playing in the eeriness of empty arenas. So maybe they do that. And if occasionally you're going to have to cancel a game or something, then that's what you're going to have to do. I'll be very surprised if we're not doing that. And so it may come down to some of the luck of the draw for who doesn't miss games. Like the Yankees, this is a very important series for them. They're hanging on by a thread. They're in fourth place in the division behind the Red Sox, and they're missing Aaron Judge. And and on top of it, if it weren't so morbid, it would have been funny. They're playing guys quite literally you've never heard of. Even if you're a non-serious baseball fan, you're going to have heard of Aaron Judge and I assume you've heard of Brett Gardner and the guys they were playing last night. I followed the New York teams. These guys. Like we talking about taking a guy off the street to run the board. That's what hey, you want to play outfield for the Yankees? That's kind of what the reality was last night. And then they went and all got hurt. That's what I mean. That's why it was almost comical. They're playing with guys you've never heard of, and then those guys are getting hurt. It was a bizarre night to be a New York baseball fan yesterday. The SEC is going on. We got plenty of football for you. Calm down. But it is July, and baseball's going on. The Mets had the most bizarre game. They were down. It's only the second time in the franchise history that they were losing 6-0 after the first inning, and they came back to win. But that's not the weird thing. How they got to down 6-0. The bases were loaded, and there was a little dribbler that went along the baseline, and the pitcher, Walker, ran and tried to hit it with his glove while it was still in foul territory so that it would be a foul ball. They teach infielders to do that. If it's foul, scoop it real fast, because if it comes back fair, you're in trouble. Then it's going too slow. You're not going to be able to throw anybody out. So he runs over, and he takes a good hard whack at it. Unfortunately for him, he does it while the ball's in fair territory. And the umpire calls it fair. And so the Mets, of course, doing what Mets do, they all start screaming at the umpire. The manager gets ejected. Meanwhile, the ball's still in play. So the guy hit a 40-foot roller down the baseline and cleared the bases. They all scored. Everybody scored. That was classic. If you haven't seen that, go watch that on the replay on MLB Network or something. It's only the Mets. Only the Mets would do that. And then they come and win the damn game. But then the Yankees got. Here's the guys who were in their outfield last night. Seriously, this is a very, very important series for them, and they were missing guys. They were missing Aaron Judge and I guess at least one other guy because of COVID. And then this is who they started. The Yankee box score started in right field was Tom Ambergy. Tom Ambergy in right field. Tom decided to try and chase a fly ball into the right field wall and knocked himself out of the game. So he's only, I don't know, he's got like 5 major league at bats, and he knocked himself out of the game, so he's out. They had Lamar playing. Hedy Lamar was playing in the outfield as well. He had a home run in the game, his 5th major league home run. The entire Yankee outfield combined for 12 home runs in a career, 12 career home runs. This is the Bronx Bombers, huh? And then they got hurt. Then the guy got hurt. Ambergy got hurt. And the other kid almost got hurt, too, but he stayed in the game. It's unbelievable, this lineup they've got. But they score 9 runs and they win 9-1. That's why baseball's such a weird game. But this is an important series for them, and they're missing guys because of COVID, and it's going to happen. It's going to happen, and if it's your favorite team, you're going to be pissed off. But I know the coaches don't want to hear it, but they've got to be realistic. It's going to happen. It certainly is happening already, and we're only at the tip of the iceberg. So. We'll see how it plays out, but the good news is if you're vaccinated, evidently you can still get this disease. That's how potent it is. But most of the people, I'm told, if you get it, it's really minor. It's like having a sniffle. You're not going on a respirator and all that crap, thank God. But it's still you're going to be quarantined because you can't spread it to other people who are not vaccinated, and so it's going to be another weird year. It just is. This thing is here. it's resilient and it's not pleasant, but that's what we're looking at. So if you're just joining us, Greg Sankey will join us. Well, he won't join us. We'll listen in. It's SEC Media Day. We'll listen in on that starting at 12:30. The commissioner is scheduled to make his statements. We'll see what he's got to say. It should be an interesting year in the SEC, of course. I'm sure there'll be some questions about the expanded playoff, the proposal for the expanded playoff, what the status is for that. I don't know what he'll tell us, but I'm sure some people will ask him. That's a pretty hot topic. It was a pretty hot topic in this offseason. So we'll see how that plays out. Also, of course, tomorrow night is, Jordan Nwora in 1 year might have himself an NBA championship ring. He's only gotten very briefly into one game at the end when they were getting blown out, but he made his only shot. And the Bucks are one win away from winning their second NBA championship, their first in 50 years. They won in 1971 with, as he was known then, Lou Alcindor and Oscar Robertson. The Phoenix Suns have still never won a championship, although they came incredibly close in 76. That unbelievable series with the Boston Celtics. That's one of the best playoff games I've ever seen, the game in Boston Garden that went to overtime, and Gar Hurd made an incredible shot at the buzzer to send it to. It was unbelievable. It really was. That's on YouTube. That's worth watching again if you've never seen it. I mean, especially when you watch it in retrospect, it's still entertaining. But when you watched it live, Richie Powers was a legendary NBA ref, and he was doing things I'd never seen them do before. The idea of stopping the clock and putting time back on the clock, I don't think anybody else had done that. That was the thing. They called the Celtics scored, and they scored with like a second to go. They didn't even have the tenths of seconds on the clock then, and he put his hand up because Phoenix had called timeout, and they stormed the court, and he cleared the court, and he told the scorer to put a second or 2 seconds. I don't remember what he put back on the clock, but he put a couple of seconds back on the clock, and they advanced the ball to midcourt because of the timeout, and then they threw it into Gar Hurd, and he made this like 30-footer. Thank God for the Celtics, there was no three-point line. They would have lost altogether. Havlicek made an unbelievable shot. It was incredible last couple of seconds, but I'd never seen anybody do that. Richie Powers had the kind of authority in the league where he was just kind of creating rules as he went there, but that became a thing. Then they started to do that. Officials would say he called timeout with a second, put it back on the clock, which was actually good in a way, because if he's sure that the guy called timeout with a couple seconds on the clock, it eliminated the pissing and moaning about, the home scorekeeper, he just let the clock run out, that kind of thing. So, that was actually a good thing he did. But I'll tell you, the video review stuff is tough. The NBA is going to have to come up. There are two things they need to address in the offseason, I think. One is the jumping into guys for a foul. And Tim Legler was on our show a couple of weeks ago, and he told me he knows that's on the agenda. So he's sure of that. And the other one is and when this play where, microscopically, there's got to be some phraseology you can use where if I clearly cause the ball to go off of your hands, I knock it out of your hands, it's very hard if somebody knocks something out of your hands that you aren't going to be the last one to touch it. I mean, he hits it, he gives it the force, but then it slides through. Pick up anything, a book, a magazine, a hamburger, anything. You're holding it, and the guy hits it. It's probably going to be your hand that just touches it last. There's got to be a rule about who causes the impetus to makes the ball go out of bounds, because if you were playing in a schoolyard and you tried to claim that was, you were the defender and knocked it out of bounds off the guy and said, no, it hit your finger, it grazed your pinky, your own teammates would beat the crap out of you. I mean, that is not what that rule's intended to do. It's intended to clear up things when you just can't see it. There's a bunch of bodies, they're scrambling for a loose ball, and you can't really see it. Ricochets, and you can't see. You go to the replay, and you see clearly it, bing, ding, it binged around and hit the guy in the red jersey or the blue jersey or the green jersey last, and then you know who gets the ball. But this idea of watching it in super slow motion and blowing it up, and it grazed his pinky on the way out, it's the defense's ball. I don't think that's not what that rule is intended for. It slows the game incredibly, and it's really not what that rule should be intended to use. So I don't know if they'll do anything about it, but I hope they do. But they are definitely going to do something about the lean-in thing. So we'll see. I mean, I was in of the ilk that Phoenix was going to win the series, and they still can. I mean, if they win in Milwaukee, they get to go play Game 7 at home. And boy, the way Game 5 started, you'd have thought this was going to be a laugher. but Milwaukee just clawed their way back. And, that is the thing. I remember, I'm going way back now. It's sad to think how many years ago it is, but it's almost like 30 years ago. And we were one of the first teams, because I made a trip to Europe. That's the whole reason why. And the European teams were all using the three-point shot way more than we were. And so I came back, and I changed my whole offense to really incorporate a lot of stuff I learned while we were in Europe. And it was great. We had a great year. We set a school record for wins that year, and we led the country in three-point shooting. Those numbers are all, long since gone now, since everybody's firing up like they're going out of style. But back then it was quite a few. But the thing I was struck by is, when you were playing the old school way, and we played really in the old school, we played like St. John's used to play when Lou Carnesecca was there, very half-court, grind it out. If you had a 10 All right. Well, we'll go to Greg Sankey in a minute, but the point I was making was, when you had a 10-point lead back then, you felt like you were up miles. Now, a 15-point lead is only 5 3-point field goals, and the game has changed. They had a big lead early, but it was not such a big lead when the other team can go knock in threes by the bushel when teams are scoring in about 120 points a game. They're not playing in the 80s and 90s anymore, so that's changed quite a bit. All right, Greg Sankey's going to the podium. We'll go right to him. We don't need to take a commercial break, right? We'll go right to him. Is he up there now? Is he there?
21.
Thanks, Kevin. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to SEC Football Media Days. Start with a couple of important comments. First, thank you to everyone who's made this week happen. Our friends here at the Winfrey and the city of Hoover. This was another one of the quicker pivots we've had to go through in the last year and a half, and their work is much appreciated. I also was here yesterday at the podium. We do a little bit of a sound check, and I remember 3 years ago when I was here, I was going to ask for a wider podium so I could manage my notes better, and I lost that task over the last year. So my discomfort at managing notes up here is real. But on to the more important things. When I was standing here in 2015, it was my first time to be the commissioner for SEC Football Media Days, and I opened with a song lyric from Bob Dylan way back in 1963, "The Times They Are A-Changin'." You may recall that Dylan spoke of you in one of the verses in that song. "Come writers and critics who prophesize with your pen. Keep your eyes wide open. The chance won't come again. And don't speak too soon, for the wheel's still in spin, and there's no telling who that it's naming. Because the loser now will be later to win, for the times they are a-changin'." So if you wonder if I pick songs that have some meaning, I think I got that one right. Maybe a little early because the times are changing. It was in Nashville, March 12, 2020, the last time I stood in front of a room of reporters. You may recall that day because we had to do the unimaginable in the Southeastern Conference. We stopped everything. No more games in our men's basketball tournament. No baseball games, no softball games, no tennis matches, golf tournaments, track and field meets. No national championships would be played for the rest of that year. It's a reminder that not only do the times change, but the times change quickly. As we worked through COVID issues last summer, we experienced not simply the greatest public health challenge of our lifetime, we also saw issues of inequity and injustice play out on the front pages and on the streets across our country. Our student athletes were leaders, just as they are every day, as they marched, talked, engaged, learned, and sought change. And I'm proud of their commitment to thoughtful, meaningful action. Their actions produced change in the state flag of Mississippi to a flag that had flown over that state for over 100 years. We had coaches on video conference speak of never having voted during their time as a student athlete, stating unequivocally that would not happen on their team moving forward. If you fast forward to August 10th, when it was clear several of our colleague conferences We're not going to move forward with a fall season. And the SEC, informed by our medical advisory task force and guided by our leaders, I simply and honestly announced, can we play? I don't know. We haven't stopped trying, and we will continue to do so every day. The potential absence of college football and the reality of an abbreviated season with limited attendance made us all realize how much we appreciate college football, what it means across our nation, but most importantly, I think we saw what it means to the young people who participate in the game of college football. We had to reimagine a season, how to start again after stopping, how to play the games in the COVID environment, and how to begin when a team was disrupted. We had to make that change happen, and I'm proud of the role the SEC played in making certain there was a 151st consecutive season of college football. In December, the SEC and Disney announced a forward-looking new media agreement. It represents change from our relationship with CBS, but when fully in effect in 2024, we'll actually have more games available on broadcast TV via ABC. Right now, we've had some local decision-making to place game times for games that will be distributed on ESPN Plus, which is an acknowledgement of our access to digital technology and use of ESPN's platform for direct-to-consumer access. And we'll still have access to ESPN's many platforms, including the SEC network. And in 24, again, when in fully effect, we will be able to announce more game times earlier, like in the summer, so that our fans and our schools have the ability to plan well in advance of the season. In March of this year, our women's basketball student athletes and coaches were rightly outraged about the inequities that became apparent around the NCAA tournament in San Antonio. On June 21st, the Supreme Court issued its decision in the Alston case, making it clear that the status quo in college athletics is not an option. And on July 1st, student athletes began their activity around name, image, and likeness opportunity. All of that illustrates our reality that we must change. But as we think about change, we must also remember that not everything is broken around college sports. We need a reminder about the many positive realities that don't receive full or accurate attention. Because we need to understand what works well and what needs to be sustained as we look towards a future in this expectation of change. So let's start with the Olympics. According to the United States Olympic Committee and Paralympic Committee, there are 613 United States Olympians. 463 of those had a college athletics experience. And that will include 80 current or former SEC student athletes, and we're one of 3 conferences where all 14 of our universities will be represented by at least one Olympian. And there's not a football player among that group. Our national college sports system makes that happen. If you change college sports, you change our Olympic development and support system in this country. When we were faced with the economic fallout from a revised schedule, a delayed start, reduced fans, reduction in ticket sales, we didn't back away from our responsibilities. In fact, we as a conference stepped up. In the SEC, we did not have any sports dropped or discontinued in our athletics programs. And well before there was an NCAA rule introduced, our conference acted to assure those student athletes who decided to opt out of playing that they would retain their financial scholarship through their athletics program. The result was we had 185 student athletes opt out who enjoyed that support from their university. And while we're talking about accurate data around college athletics, understand that our student athletes don't go hungry. There are no limits around the nutritional support provided to our student athletes. There's also been misrepresentations of what happens when a student athlete is injured. Understand, when a young person enrolls on our campuses to participate in college athletics, they, as a matter of standard practice, go through advanced medical screenings. The reality is, young people have maladies detected through that process that for the first time are frequently treated. And when we have injuries in college sports, our student athletes have access to world-class physicians and the best rehabilitation support. And when a student athlete is injured and no longer able to participate in their chosen sport, our universities willingly provide support under the NCAA's medical exemption category, and last year that included financial support to 105 student athletes in this league. In addition to the financial support provided to student athletes who are injured, unable to participate, or opted to not participate, we had 127 student athletes supported by SEC athletics departments whose eligibility was complete before they completed their undergraduate degree. They were welcomed back willingly by our programs, not because of a rule or government mandate, because that's how we care for young people. And in any year, there are more than 5,400 student athletes supported through an athletic scholarship in the Southeastern Conference. Of that group, we saw 67% of our teams access national championship postseason tournaments or playoffs. We had eight different universities with 9 teams earning national championships. So I'll clarify that. What that means is more than half of our universities, 8, celebrated their own national championship moment since January of this year. The SEC produced 12 Players of the Year from our 21 sports. We had the NCAA Woman of the Year, a National Football Foundation Scholar Athlete, 2 Honda Sport Award winners, and I could go on with a list of individual accolades. And this happened because we tried when it was difficult. And it happens because of the world-class support provided to offer incredible athletic and educational experiences in the Southeastern Conference. To make what happened last year take place, we had to create a conference-wide COVID testing program. That involved a third-party logistics and medical support team. It included nearly 350,000 COVID tests. About 340,000 were lab-based PCR. That was our standard through the week, through every sport, regardless of the season. Another 10,000 rapid antigen tests. Right now, 43% of our football teams, that's 6 of 14, have reached the 80% threshold in roster vaccination. That number needs to grow and grow rapidly. We have learned how to manage through a COVID environment, but we do not yet have control of the COVID environment. And that finds us preparing to return towards normal this fall. But we see realities around us. Olympians are removed from participation because of positive COVID tests. The Yankees-Red Sox game last Friday was postponed. And sadly, our colleagues at North Carolina State weren't able to continue the competition in the College World Series, which we cherish competition, particularly at that time of the year. But each reminds us of the need to be vigilant about our health. Let me be clear to our fans, to our coaches, to our staff members, and to our student athletes. COVID-19 vaccines are widely available. They've proven to be highly effective, and when people are fully vaccinated, we all have the ability to avoid serious health risks, reduce the virus's spread, and maximize our chances of returning to a normal college football experience and to normal life. With 6 weeks to go, before kickoff, now is the time to seek that full vaccination. And we know nothing is perfect, but the availability and the efficacy of the COVID-19 vaccines are an important and incredible product of science, not a political football, and we need to do our part to support a healthy society. Because as we look back, the potential absence of college sports last year caused us to think about not losing sight of the lifelong experiences, the laboratory of learning that takes place, and the educational benefits that accrue to the people who participate on our teams. But just like every human endeavor, college athletics is not perfect. And you know the criticisms. Many of you have likely written those criticisms. And as leaders, we have a responsibility to improve our attention to genuinely identifying, addressing, and resolving the lingering issues. Not everyone's going to be pleased, and change takes time. However, if we understand both the strengths of college sports and the key areas to be addressed, we can work towards effective solutions. But let's leave the legislative issues and the COVID issues for just a few moments. We now have William Tate leading LSU as the SEC's first African-American president or chancellor. We have African-American athletics directors. We have head coaches in men's basketball and in women's basketball from underrepresented groups. Yet after hiring 8 new head football coaches in the past 2 years in the SEC, we have no underrepresented group leading one of our football programs. We have no head coaches from underrepresented groups. It's a reality that has changed before, and it must change again. So in early June, our presidents and chancellors approved a new initiative to establish an expectation for athletics department hiring processes around key leadership roles, athletics directors, senior administrators, and head coaches. And while employment decisions are made not by the conference office, but by our campuses and their athletics departments, this change will bring a collaborative expectation where when these openings appear, we'll be in communication, sharing information about potentially viable candidates from historically underrepresented groups. To make certain our member institutions are fulfilling their expectations under this new policy, each year will be expected to provide a written certification to the commissioner about their efforts to include diverse candidates in their finalist pool, and we'll share this information with you a bit later today. But as times change, we find ourselves not celebrating first downs, touchdowns, or championships. Instead, we talk about litigation, about legislation, and about lobbying. We are in a transformative time, perhaps the most transformative time in the entire history of college sports. And there must be recognition that this transformation can't come from a set of siloed decisions. We have to understand the connection, the nuances, the implications, and the unimagined outcomes associated with decisions. So let's start first with a continuing point of criticism, and that's the economics of college sports. However, as we adjust to different economic expectations around college sports activity, we all must understand the reality associated with whatever direction emerges. As I talked about a moment ago, will there be a college-based Olympic development and support system? Will opportunities be reduced as our colleges and universities slim down their sports offerings? What's to be done with existing contractual, financial, and facility commitments? If a new economic model is to be imposed or created, how do we continue to maintain a focus on improving educational outcomes, maintaining widespread interest, and supporting broad-based programs? And how do we adjust college sports within the boundaries of antitrust law? Earlier, I mentioned a small piece of medical support for our student athletes and made that specific to how we function. But a few years ago, the Autonomy 5 conferences adopted an expectation, a requirement, that 2 years after a student athlete's participation, our universities provide medical support through financial support for those student athletes 2 years after they departed. Is that the right healthcare expectation for college athletics? If not, how should it change? Is it length of time? Is it substance of support? And even as more young people graduate from our programs, how do we meaningfully foster career transition? We have programs at the conference office to help facilitate that. How do we expand that? How do our campuses perhaps become more intentional and have more flexibility at facilitating that career transition? What attention is owed to transfers who seek a greener pasture but instead lose their scholarship opportunity? This year's transfer portal had over 1,600 FBS scholarship recipients enter. There are still 1,100 active in that portal. Across all Division I sports, over 13,000 entered, and over 11,000 still remain. There's not enough information for me to explain that data, but we have a responsibility to dig deeper. Because it's not good enough just to provide flexibility. We have to understand the impacts of our decision making. We also have to understand how to support an environment that provides more flexibility, permits legitimate transfers while holding to account those who tamper and want to turn college rosters into their personal recruiting grounds. In December, I sent a lengthy letter to the NCAA Division I Council. My purpose was to identify and make observations around the NCAA's enforcement and infractions process that I felt had to be addressed sooner rather than later. And in each observation, I offered at least some form of suggestion to help guide us forward. Perhaps not perfect suggestions, but something to be considered. Because we need to be clear, those accused of violations deserve a fair and timely outcome. And those who compete against those accused of violations deserve that same fair and timely outcome. And the national process for accountability must focus on issues of primary importance with cases resolved in the most timely manner possible. And it's easy. In fact, I've been at fault. It's easy to criticize the NCAA. It's an organization of over 1,000 different institutions at 3 different divisional levels. In Division I, there are 351 campuses, 32 conferences. That's a difficult role. But I was pleased by President Emmert's call to reconsider the responsibilities of the National Office of Conferences and of campuses. While not knowing the path forward, we desire this necessary dialogue, as it remains important for college athletics to have an effective governing body. We have to move forward producing legally defensible, relevant results and regulations. We must recognize the expectations, demands, and pressures that are present on the campuses of this conference are not uniform across all of Division I. And expecting every conference to come together to debate, discuss, and produce effective decisions for everyone is not our modern reality. We must begin to adapt. And as we witness real-time adaptation to the new name, image, and likeness environment, our athletics programs are already properly supporting student athletes within the boundaries and expectations of state laws or of executive order. It's a complex task that's made challenging because everyone is operating according to different state laws. But the NCAA's temporary rules governing name, image, and likeness were a necessary reality. But those interim policies are no substitute for a uniform national standard. While we all will benefit from a standard that supports the interests of student athletes while preventing exploitive practices. with policies that can be understood and administered by universities and colleges at every level, while also providing prospective student athletes with clarity as they are recruited nationally across state lines and have to understand the different name, image, and likeness laws. Because state laws are either inconsistent or non-existent, the NCAA rules can no longer resolve key issues. We need a federal solution. We understand it's difficult to gather the support for such federal legislation. However, congressional action is necessary if we're going to provide every student a clear, consistent, and fair opportunity to benefit from their name, image, and likeness. The Southeastern Conference and our member universities are ready to engage in the collaborative problem-solving effort with all of college sports major stakeholders. Our present reality highlights the need for a national dialogue on what is expected of college sports, be it healthcare, educational certainty, career transition, examining the economics, or myriad other issues. We in the SEC are dedicated to the shared values of higher education and high-level collegiate athletics competition while ensuring the unifying traditions and spirit of college sports remain interwoven into our nation's campuses and our communities. And we must now take the additional step of ensuring student athletes are provided with modern and reimagined opportunities to benefit from their participation in college sports. Let me again say thank you for everyone who made it possible for us to be here today. Thank you for your flexibility since that date in March of 2020 when everything was going to Zoom. You remember, people weren't happy that we created that distance, but we did things that we had to do to make possible what we achieved. Our staff is here and ready to help through the remaining days. As is our tradition, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin, but I'm going to leave you with this one last reminder. The times are changing. It's not simply a song lyric, it's a reality. It is an uncomfortable reality, but that's how progress is made. Through it all, I remain convinced in the Southeastern Conference, our best days are still ahead. So Kevin, I'm going to grab a drink real quick, and I'm going to throw it to you.
Thank you, Commissioner. If you have a question, please raise your hand. We have Savannah, Riley, and AJ will bring a microphone to you. Again, if you'll please stand, give your name and affiliation when the microphone gets to you. So we're going to start right over here on my left, about 3/4 of the way back. Please stand and give your name and affiliation.
Seth Emerson with The Athletic. Greg, last year with the postponements and moving around games, especially football, is that something that will not happen this year? Will you simply go, if a team cannot play, will they have a no contest or a forfeit?
So let's just indicate like the realities we deal with. You hope not to have disruption, but hope is not a plan, is the great cliche. We still have roster minimums that exist, just like last year. What I've identified for consideration among our membership is we remove those roster minimums, and you're expected to play as scheduled. That means your team needs to be healthy to compete. And if not, that game won't be rescheduled. And thus, to dispose of the game, the forfeit word comes up at this point. That's not a policy, and what you see are the bookends now for decision making. We've not built in the kind of time we did last year, particularly at the end of the season, to accommodate disruption. And unless we're going to do that, our teams are going to have to be fully prepared to play their season as scheduled, which is why embedded in my remarks is the vaccination motivation.
Okay, we'll go right here in the same section along the aisle.
Good morning, Commissioner. Jacques Doucet, WAFB-TV in Baton Rouge. It's viewed that some SEC schools have a competitive and recruiting advantage over others because there is no uniform drug policy. Would the SEC benefit from a uniform drug policy?
We've talked about that issue for years, and I'll give you credit because I don't think I've had that question like 3 or 4 years. So there's a set of things that usually happen in Destin. That's one of them. As Ross Dellinger knows, the alcohol question was always there, so that was his task. Which is not linked to your question, by the way, so I want to draw the distinction between the legal and the illegal. We've not gone back into that conversation. Our member universities have felt it appropriate to allow each campus to make its own decisions around drug policy. Our universities have policies that extend even beyond their athletics program, so it's not been a point of conversation.
We'll go down here to our left, second row, Ron.
Yeah, Ron Higgins, TigerRagMagazine.com. With all the changes in college athletics, with the NIL and players transfer rule and whatever, are college commissioners closer than, say, 5 years ago, until, especially the Power 5 conferences into splitting off into their own little country, so to speak?
I don't know where. Well, I guess it was Commissioner 5 years ago. It's been a long time. You tried to give me a day off, and then you throw that one at me on social media. No, that's not the focus. I went through a list of observations that aren't just NCAA related. They are college athletics related. That's actually us. And some ideas, in fact, ideas that I've had, actually don't resolve issues. They just linger. And so are we closer? Not in my imagination. I do think we all have to be mindful of the reality in front of us. And as I noted, when President Emmert spoke about the need for change and reimagining the national office role, the conference role, and the campus role, that doesn't speak to your question, but it does speak to we're going to have to administer this differently. That's likely the next process. Yet, Ron, I think people are going to be asking that question of me. I think within our programs, people will ask that question of me. I think nationally, people will ask that question of me. But it doesn't predict that kind of outcome at this point.
We'll stay in the same section, about 4 rows back, right in front of me.
John Talty, AL.com. Greg, you said we need a federal solution. I guess what, if anything, gives you the confidence that Congress can actually deliver a solution to these issues?
All I can do is keep asking and making the case for why it's necessary. And I've learned over the last 2 years I should have paid much more attention in high school civics because I'm learning much. You know, the Schoolhouse Rock, I'm just a Bill video was like my expertise, and it's magnified. There is no assurance. I hope, and I've testified once, I've had conversations, provide some education and perspective about what that national standard would mean. We've also, and I've said here, are willing to discuss other aspects that may be on congressional leaders' minds. I don't know that we can resolve every one of them through federal legislation, nor given the level of care we provide, do I think every element needs to be regulated. I do think every element needs to be understood. So, John, do I have assurance? Can I predict an outcome? I cannot. And if that's where we are, we're going to be dealing with this tension. We're going to learn a lot. Obviously, we have in the last, 3 weeks. We'll learn a lot in the next 3 months. And we'll see how that guides us if, in fact, there is no federal legislation. But think about some elements that I mentioned. Start with a prospective student athlete who's recruited by our universities. That's going to be somebody recruited nationally. How do they and their family understand what name, image, and likeness policies are going to apply upon their collegiate enrollment? States are all different, or they don't have anything, and they've just been given permission, so some level of institutional policy provides. When you examine state legislation, there's not a high level of oversight, and I just read on Twitter some really high number of businesses that are now in this space. Yeah, there are businesses that are well-intentioned that will support young people, but outside our league, at different levels, I've heard of young people walking into compliance offices with contracts that say, pay so-and-so $5,000, they'll create your brand and your website. or $10,000 or $15,000. That's not this one-sided flow of money that everyone expects. So how do we oversee this properly? And if the outcome of the Alston case is we have to be less restrictive in NCAA rules, then we're back in this conversation about Congress. And that's the difficulty of being a conference commissioner, an athletics director, or a compliance coordinator right now. And I will give you a point of praise, because you asked a question that was actually really important last July at this time. End of Paul's show, and congratulations to Paul on a contract extension being announced. You asked, why are we trying to play college football? And you provided me lack of sleep that night, because that's the kind of question that should have been asked, and actually worked with a lot of people to try to answer why we needed some clarity. And hopefully people are convinced we did it well, we did it right, and it was an appropriate step. And I'm not blaming it on you, John, but I just give you credit for raising an issue that cost me some sleep to try to figure out a path forward a year ago.
Commissioner, go over the left, third row.
Hey, Greg. Jared Joseph at Fox 44 in Baton Rouge. You talked about COVID and the need for vaccination, but as cases continue to rise in different parts of the country, are you coordinating with other schools? For example, with LSU season opener against UCLA and the county reinstating a mask mandate, what are the conversations like as far as attendance and roster management goes?
A couple aspects. One, there still is communication among the conferences, particularly the 5 conferences and our medical leaders. That began last May, was incredibly beneficial, and will continue now. Our campuses who are traveling to those non-conference games are going to be in communication with the host and the host community to understand what policies will apply. Chicago, for example, had a no vaccination, out-of-state travel limitation on the states of Missouri and Arkansas announced last week. What we'll see, I expect, is municipalities and public health officials, perhaps at the state level, continuing to adjust, which brings me back to the mantra of last year, which is we're going to prepare to play the season as scheduled. And I'm convinced we'll move forward to the Labor Day weekend start, unlike last year. But we will have to adapt to the circumstances of COVID-19, of the virus. That's where I talk about we know how to manage through, but we don't have control of the COVID environment.
We'll go to the far back left side of the room.
Pardon me for not getting up, Commissioner.
That's okay. We've got a strong enough relationship to understand each other.
I don't have to stand and salute. I appreciate that.
No one's done that yet, by the way.
They should. Given President Emmert's comments and about many responsibilities falling more and more on the conferences at the conference level, will that include enforcement? What is the current status of NCAA enforcement? And given nobody seems to know exactly what the rules are until they're hashed out, is there still even a working enforcement staff?
Oh, absolutely. In the midst of trying to make observations to move the process forward, Cecil, I have communicated in meetings and in settings, I think highly of John Duncan, the NCAA's president of enforcement. That's an incredibly difficult role. And the enforcement staff has a difficult role. So let's just take a step back. Let's understand, in 2018, the Commission on College Basketball introduced a new process, an independent review process. That process hasn't reduced outcomes from arrests made by the FBI in September of 2017. And some of those acts of alleged wrongdoing occurred back in 2016. So we're now 5 years removed without outcomes. We need outcomes, particularly from those high-profile matters. The enforcement staff, the Committee on Infractions, are still active because we have had matters resolved. I think there was one announced last week, didn't involve this conference. But we need to readjust our expectations. And if you look over time, there have been a set of individual working groups that have introduced change. So the Commission on College Basketball most recently, the Enforcement Working Group 10 years ago, there was a Duff report, there was a Lee Commission. How do those all connect? And the rhetoric around what we need is more aggressive penalties, I would argue, doesn't work. What would work more effectively might be reduced penalties, but specific time expectations to implement those penalties while slimming down the focus to that which is of primary concern for the support of college athletics. I'll give an illustration. A college coach walks into a high school and has a conversation with a high school junior. We've had universities spend 6 figures defending coaches in that. We've had potential head coach suspensions for an interaction. If we want to foster a college-going culture through college athletics, why wouldn't we allow those conversations to take place in football? They can take place in different ways in basketball. Stop spending time, the opportunity cost associated with that enforcement, and focus on the primary issues. So yes, there is a role, incredibly hard job. I have a lot of respect for those leading in that work. But we have to have timely outcomes, particularly in high-profile matters. And I spoke of fair and timely, which I think is a two-way street in this process.
Okay, as we get ready for the coaches and the players, we'll take one final question here in the center aisle.
Brandon Marcello, 24/7 Sports. Commissioner, you talk about a lot of these changes that need to be made and trying to make progress on that, but with so many different voices in the room and trying to get everybody on the same page, one, how do you get to that point where you get everybody in the same room and start making progress? And secondly, is there also an onus on, say, the commissioners and, for that matter, the university presidents who maybe haven't been as vocal as we have seen some commissioners?
I'm not convinced you can put everyone in a room and have the needed outcomes. It doesn't mean everyone's just detached, but it may be that we have to first identify the principles for change. That informs some elements of change that brings about a process for change. As I said, I don't know the path forward. We have a responsibility, and almost to Cecil's question, as things are delegated, you take enforcement. We had an investigator 20 years ago, or 15 years ago, or 17 years ago is when it stopped, because it didn't work effectively. The Pac-12 had its own process, kind of double jeopardy. That's gone away. So there are roles. In answering your question directly, I think some high-level thought focused on specific elements is at the core of this. And we can add, but we're not going to solve every problem and be able to legislate college athletics programs through the NCAA manual. We can govern some aspects, but 450 pages seems less relevant today than it ever has before.
All right, thank you for your time, Commissioner. We'll be back with our first coach in Solidarity.
I'll be back for my introductions, which I know you all cherish. You missed them last July.
Find me someone who engenders more confidence in there being some sense of leadership in college sports. His headline?
Wow. Okay. Was that who was that just speaking there? Was that that was from the SEC Network, or who was speaking there? It sounded like
that was SEC Network.
Was that the old boxing announcer? I forgot. Joe Tessitore? It sounded like Joe Tessitore.
I believe it is.
It's awkward. I mean, I work for the company. I work for ESPN. SEC is a cash cow for them, and I think SEC in general is a cash cow when it comes to college sports, and you don't want to bite the hand that feeds you. But that's a little. I mean, he's good. He's a good speaker. He's got a nice way. He banters with the reporters, and he said some. I mean, there was meat on it. It wasn't a fluff thing. He talked about things that are of substance. But I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I mean, what else could he say? I mean, unless he was going to go up and make a complete ass of himself, what else could he say? He said, first of all, they congratulated themselves on all the things they did well last year. I understand that. They've been, college sports has gotten bashed from a lot of people in the last couple of years. And so you want to stand up and say, wait a second, we're not all bad. Okay, whatever. I mean, I don't think it was a particularly meaningful part of it, but fine. You want to take I mean, the part, it reminds me of, there's that commercial out right now with the guy who, overcame a whole bunch of things, and he wound up winning swimming gold medals. And it's a beer commercial. And they talk about like that's the spirit of our beer, and implied it's kind of like, well, he drinks their beer, that's why he won gold medals.
Hey, how do you know? Have you ever won a gold medal? I'm just saying. Maybe you should drink some Modelo, Bob.
It's kind of a faulty connection there. It's a little shaky if then, but okay. Well, it's kind of the same deal there. He's talking about the Olympic sports and how many of them play in college, and like, if the our Olympic teams will fall apart if we don't have these sports in college. It's going to be like, just stop it. I mean, if they don't, these people are determined that somebody will step up. They will. Somebody will step up and fill the void. I mean, look at right now what's going on in basketball. I mean, the AAU circuit is probably more important to the recruiters than the high school circuit right now. And then you got an event like the TBT, which was conceived out of thin air. I mean, they just made up this thing. We're going to have a basketball tournament this summer and give a winning team $1 million. And now they've got teams with stories and histories behind them. I mean, people fill a void. That's what we do. There's a vacuum, and they fill it, and somebody will fill it. Will it be an adjustment? Sure. I mean, are there good coaches in college to help these kids get ready for the Olympics? Absolutely. But to somehow take a bow for Olympics because of college sports is a little bit like the Modelo beer thing. I think the credit is actually to the athletes. And if they didn't do it there, they'd do it somewhere else. I mean, how about the people who are going to go over and compete in sports that they don't play in college? I mean, what about that? If the only way to do it were to do it in college, then we wouldn't win any medals in anything where people aren't playing in college, and that's a faulty bit of logic. So I have trouble with that, but I get it. I mean, you can't start with just talking about all the problems. You got to.
No, it's a State of the Union, right? I mean,
exactly.
That's exactly what it is.
You got to give the people some sugar, and he gave them some sugar. But the rest of it, I mean, what he said, and I'm not knocking it, is there's challenges coming up, and he can't give you an answer because, not that he's incompetent, because it's impossible to answer right now. And then he says at the end, if you want to be troubled by one thing, it's this. He said, I don't think you can put everybody in the same room and figure it out. Well, if you can't put everybody in the same room and figure it out, I don't know how the hell you are going to figure it out. Because that seems to be the only way you can make some sense of this is find some, you know what they say about compromise. When it's done well, nobody's happy. Everybody feels like, damn it, I should have gotten a little bit more, fine, whatever. But if you're not going to put everybody in the room, they could take a page from horse racing. They really could. Horse racing has destroyed itself to a large degree because they can't get on the same page. Everybody fight. The piece of the pie got drastically smaller when horse racing fell out of favor with the American sports public, to the extent that it did. And so rather than say, hey, let's all get together and see if we can prop this thing back up, everybody said, to hell with that. I'm going to grab as big a piece of this pie as I can. It's a smaller pie now, but I'm going to get as much as I can. And so everybody went and grabbed as much as they could, and they wound up cannibalizing each other. Well, college sports is not, I don't know for sure that they're not following that same mold right now, because the old saying is, you want to find, the real story of anything, follow the money. And the reason that they are not going to get in the same room is because the people that don't make the amount of money that the SEC makes are going to look at it very differently than the SEC does, and they don't want to take a chance of going in there and saying, we're going to give up back some of this money. We're going to make sure that we take care of ourselves first, and that's, if you do that, then everybody keeps fighting these topics are the same topics that we've fought over for years. The only thing is, right now they've gotten more complicated, meaning money has always been at the core of it, and what the athletes should get. And nothing new. Even people make a big deal like it's the only thing that's new is its name, image, and likeness. But years ago, they debated whether the kids should be allowed to keep their Pell Grants, and they did. And and a whole bunch of things have been discussed about the athletes sharing in the pot. Well, now it's different because basically, the government has said, look, you got to take care of these kids in a different way than you have been. And they're like, okay, great, but we don't really know how. And so now everybody's trying to figure it out, and they're basically making it up as they go. And so you're going to have all sorts of questions and some chaos, and that's just the reality. And he kind of said that, and I give him credit for that. He didn't make it sound like, it's an easy solution. He was like, what he basically said, if you heard him, was, we can't stick our head in the sands. We're at a time of drastic change. Well, that part he's got right. But as I said, if he said anything else, he'd look like a fool, because anybody who's even got a modicum of interest in college sports knows full well that it is a drastic period of change. There's no question. The answer everybody's looking for is, well, what shape is that change going to take? And he can't tell you that, not because he's incompetent or anything, because it's impossible to know, and that's the whole point of it. So you can rephrase the question 10 different ways, but you're going to have a hard time making some sense of it. The thing that he said that didn't get a lot of attention, that I think actually has more meat on the bone than a lot of the other stuff he said, was the conferences, a lot of them tried to put their own enforcement agent in place, for lack of a better word. And they all abandoned ship on it because, this is the same problem that the NCAA ran into. They don't have subpoena power. It was one guy. They could never get anywhere with it. And it wound up being, an expense and a problem that didn't accomplish anything. And he makes a good point. I'll never forget a guy years ago, when I was still coaching. I was at Division I at that time, and they had one of those annual meetings, and one of the guys stood up. I don't even remember which coach it was, but I always remember the line. He said, what we've got to do is figure out how we can separate the T-birds from the T-shirts. And I always thought that was a great line, meaning how do we separate people who are violating the rule by giving kids Thunderbirds, cars, from people who are giving kids T-shirts when they come and take campus visits? That's a lot of what the crap was. Well, this kid visited, and they gave him a pair of shoes and T-shirts, and you're not allowed to do that. And that's what he was talking about. Football coaches, and it's always, of course, about football in the SEC, the basketball coaches have a way to, they used to call them bumps. I don't know what the hell they call them now. I've been out of the loop so long, but it's not a full-fledged visit, but you bump into a kid, and they actually had to figure out what you're allowed to do, because if you didn't say hello to him, you could come across as rude and arrogant and really damage your recruiting. But if you go beyond that, then you're taking a visit with the kid, so they used to call it a bump, and I forget what the term was. And beyond normal pleasantries, it was anything beyond that was considered taboo. So if you ran into a kid, hey John, how you doing, good to see you, how you feeling, everything okay, good, and just had to walk away. Well, football, I guess they've made a big deal about you're not even allowed to do that. And he's right. I mean, wasting our time on stuff like that when we have guys making quote-unquote strong-ass offers, and that thing just keeps lingering, that is a stain on the SEC. And anybody who says otherwise is absolutely fooling themselves. I mean, here's a guy on record is talking about making strong-ass offers to kids, and that thing is just still floating out there, and he's still marching merrily along. And, and in their defense, it's far be it for me to defend LSU, because I think it's crazy that he's still coaching. But the fact of the matter is, if I were them, I'd say, well, why should we hammer our guy? There's only one school that hammered their own guy, and that's Louisville. And, look where it got them. Nothing, basically. The NCAA still gave them no mercy, and they've, paid the price, having to rebuild their program, and all these other guys just go marching merrily along. So I think the point behind all that is, if they're going to do anything that's going to really have substantive change, they've got to get input from people so that they know what really the issues are. In other words, a college, he made a great point. We should be encouraging kids to go to college. That's a kind of, it's disingenuous to some degree, because these kids are going to go try and play in college because that's what they want to do. But fine, you can say he's a college representative. He should be allowed to talk to kids, fine. But he's right in the sense that, why make a big deal about that? There's certainly big issues at play here, and those are the ones that we got to figure out a way. What is the reality that you can prevent, for lack of a better word, you can have legislation over, and those that you can't? And right now, the simple fact of the matter is, the floodgates are open. They're going to be paying. Players are going to be getting paid, even though the schools aren't doing the paying. They're going to be parlaying their athletic abilities into money. So whether it comes from these coffers of the school or not is, I wouldn't say totally irrelevant, but it is definitely a game changer in how you look at this whole thing. And so what's important? What's really important now? Is it really important that a guy's talking to a kid at a certain, says hello to a kid or something? I mean, it's almost to the point where, you've got to completely change how you view what's done. For example, in pro sports, I mean, it was ridiculous. When I think back on it now, no wonder Curt Flood got all pissed off. Curt Flood is a guy who played for the St. Louis Cardinals, and he was traded to the Phillies, and he didn't want to go play. I think it was the Phillies. Sorry, Produce. But I think he was traded to Philadelphia, and he didn't want to go.
That's all right. This happens a lot with Philly.
And so he was like, well, you shouldn't be allowed to trade me without my say. And, of course, there was a thing called the reserve clause. And the reserve clause basically said, well, the Cardinals own your contract, and if you don't want to play, they just traded it to Philadelphia. And if you don't want to play for Philadelphia, you can't play in the major leagues. That's what it comes down to. And he won. And that was part of the beginning of free agency. And certainly you had to have some conditions in there, and they have that rule in place now. I don't know, is it 5 years, I guess? You have 5 years with the team. You can void a trade, or 10 years. I don't know what it is. But the point is, they made framework now so that players have there's free agency. So they had to come up with a salary cap, and they came up with things. Now in college, you're not going to be able to do that, I assume, but you can limit the number of players. What makes it dicey right now is, you just heard the commissioners say, well, we have limits on players, but right now, if the game is scheduled, you're going to be expected to play it, and so if a whole bunch of your guys are out because of COVID, you're going to have to play with your backup. So they're going to expand the potential size of the roster. So now somebody could exploit that. I mean, if you're Alabama, who's got unlimited resources, they could get 60 All-Americans instead of 40 or whatever they do now. So those are all the questions that you're going to have to answer. But the fact of the matter is, you're going to have to come up with a way that is much more realistic. And we're still making a big deal about bumps and that kind of stuff when there's all this money floating around now. It's just kind of ridiculous. I mean, it's kind of like if you went into a casino and it's obvious that the croupier was cheating. I mean, you look at the roulette wheel, and the numbers are not the way they're supposed to be, but they make a big deal because you're wearing sandals, and you're not allowed to have to wear dress shoes or something. It's like, I'm not sure we really have our priorities in place here. We might really want to make sure that the games are legitimate and not pay attention to that kind of stuff. And that's what college sports is a lot of right now. They're cracking down on guys violating a dress code, and they're not paying attention to the substantial stuff. And so now they've got to redefine for themselves what is the substantial stuff, because it's all changed. And that's kind of like I think it was Georgia, wasn't it Georgia? I think it was. They came out and said, this is great. It's a great way for our athletes to be able to make some extra money, or make money at all, not extra because they're not getting paid by the school. Make some money, but if you're going to pay them for some task, it has to be, for lack of a better word, commensurate with what the market would demand. In other words, you can't say, I'd like this kid to come to my son's birthday party and I'm going to give him $500,000. There's nobody. You wouldn't pay, I don't know, the highest paid entertainer in the world. You wouldn't have to pay $500,000 to come spend an hour at a birthday party. It's just an excuse to pay the kid an exorbitant amount of money. So, but again, how do you define that? That's the point. These terms make sense, but how do you know? How do you know what if $100,000, $10,000? I mean, how do you figure out what's exorbitant? And who administers that? And they don't have any of those answers, because they don't. It's chaos right now. And I give Andy Bashir and the state credit for helping the schools here, because if they hadn't come up with a policy, these poor people running their programs here wouldn't know what they could do and what they couldn't do. Because how would you know? There's the NCAA kicked it to the curb. They expected the government to deal with it. The government did not. Now the NCAA is trying to figure out how to deal with it. Meanwhile, a bunch of states have already put things in place, and you're going to get left behind. So it was very, it is big business after all. And it's not just quote unquote amateur sports. That's the part that's just maddening when they keep talking about it that way, folks. I mean, stop. The guy gets up there. His whole press conference is about big business stuff. I mean, he's talking like this is a meeting you could have at IBM or U.S. Steel. I mean, these are old, antiquated, big corporations, but you get the gist of what I'm saying.
Standard Oil, yes.
Standard Oil, yes. You could have this meeting in any boardroom. I mean, they're talking about the same kinds of things. And now you're going to pretend, but we have to defend amateurs, and that's where Mark Emmert lost all his credibility as far as I was concerned. That we have to celebrate the amateur model while he's making $7 million, whatever the hell he makes. I mean, it was so ridiculous. They just insult your intelligence all the time. So, I mean, he was good. Don't get me wrong. I mean, but Joe Tessitore was doing like a testimonial to him at the end, and I was like, I don't know if it was worthy of that. It certainly didn't rank up there with my fellow Americans. Ask not what your country can do for you kind of deal, wasn't. I don't think we're going to be quoting this speech years from now.
Oh, you wait and see, Bob.
Huh?
You wait and see. We will be.
the kids, I'm just in speech class, kids trying to decide, do I want to do the Lou Gehrig, I consider myself the luckiest man on the face of the earth, or Greg Sankey's opening comments to the
Greg Sankey patting himself on the back. I have done so much for college sports, all of sports.
We were so good last year. We did. I mean, I get a lot of it, but it was just. I will give him credit for this, and you can say, okay, well, sure, you're going to give him credit because he basically sides with your point of view. But I mean, he's in a part of the country where there's a whole crap ton. You can't swing a dead cat without hitting an anti-vaxxer, and he basically said in no uncertain terms, listen, if you want to be the best way we can make sure our football season goes on as planned is get as many people vaccinated as possible. I mean, I give him credit for that. Because you know why he said that? Because that's the fact, and doctors will tell you that. That's not a political, and it's not a political thing. It should never become a political thing, but it is. It's trying to shut the barn doors off the animal after the animals have all left. There's nothing we can do about it now. It is very much in the public's political consciousness, but he's right about that. And if you're playing free and easy with the vaccination, and all of a sudden you miss a whole bunch of players for one of the important games on your schedule, don't come crying to him. Because I mean, the simple fact of the matter is, it's out there. You can get it. It's free. You can go get it and get yourself protected. And give yourself the best chance to have your team healthy. So
don't be a dope. Get poked.
Wait, did you just make that up?
Yeah, I just made it up.
Don't be dope. Get poked. I like that. Don't got to come up with another one there, because that doesn't really rhyme. It's dope and poke.
It's like a half rhyme. I'm really good at the half rhymes.
There's actually a term for that. The people who write songs, there's a term for that.
Trust me, I learned how to rhyme from Eminem because it was all half rhyming. And he doesn't actually rhyme anything. He half rhymes everything.
They're just in the same neighborhood. They're
exactly
close. So. I have to look that up. There's actually a term for that, but I mean that's kind of what we're looking at. So we'll see. Well, it's going to be an interesting year. The SEC has, I'm not a big fan of arrogance, and they in the Big Ten go back and forth for most arrogant league, I think. Isn't that safe to say? I think that's safe to say.
I'd say it's pretty accurate.
Yeah. So
I mean, they walk the Pac-12 like a dog, so they can't be it. They have no pride.
No, the Pac-12 is staying at the Motel 6 and eating, then getting the dollar specials at the hamburger joints. That's kind of just, could we possibly come to your party too? No, damn it. That's kind of where they are. But it's going to be an interesting year in the league in general. A lot of new coaches, a lot of skilled players, as we said, have departed. As I said, the only way you can tell is look how many interior linemen are being brought to the presser. And that's not bad in a way, because they usually give you the best copy. Those guys are usually very good. They don't usually resent being spoken with either, because they don't get besieged like the quarterbacks do. So, but we'll see as the media days get underway for the SEC. All right, we'll take a break. We went for a good hour and plus with Greg Sankey and our comments about his comments. So we'll take a break. We got some spots to make up, and then we'll come back and do more radio. The big head of producer's out today. He's not feeling well, so we've got the acrimonious one is in house, and we're glad to have him. So stay with us here on this Monday on the V Show on ESPN 680 1057.
Make your life better with a new job at UPS. Join Team Louisville as a warehouse worker, earn $14.50 plus up to $425 in weekly bonuses depending on shift. Search and apply now at upsjobs.com/Louisville. That's upsjobs.com/Louisville.
Exmark makes the mowers that care for the lawns that set the stage for the backyard life. As the commercial mowers more landscape pros trust, Exmark mowers get you on and off the lawn without compromising cut quality, comfort, or reliability. Exmark, official mowers of the backyard life, starting at $29.99. Learn about the available finance offers and check them out today at The Mower Shop, 7400 Preston Highway, Louisville, Kentucky, 502-969-6433.
CarMax is hiring experienced auto technicians for many of its 200-plus stores nationwide. If you're looking for a job where you can make a great living while working on the cars that you love, then CarMax is the place for you. Join CarMax to grow your technical expertise and work with state-of-the-art tools and technology. Work with the cars you love. Join CarMax. Apply today at CarMaxAutotech.com.